Hello, this is Debra Carmona. Would you like to do a gingerbread project? Well, today I'm going to share some basic gingerbread tips that will work with any type of construction that you choose to make. Let's make gingerbread. I will share different options on how to work with various ages of children. I made the dough one evening, divided the dough into 3 batches, wrapped them in plastic wrap, chilled in the refrigerator overnight. Well, it wasn't a whole night because I actually got up at 3 a.m. to do it because I was worried about time, but I needed to get it done by a certain date. You can do this ahead of time to be ready for the children or the grandchildren to help you make cookies when you want to do that with them. It's a great Christmas activity. You can keep the dough in the fridge for a few days if necessary. Building gingerbread houses from scratch can be a very time-consuming project. I have made complicated patterns in the past. I made a Victorian gingerbread house with glass windows, working lights, a yard full of trees and bushes with lights. It took me 3 days to do. The year before, I made something a little smaller, a whimsical gingerbread house, while I guided some of my grandchildren to design their own small house. That was done in 1 day. There are shortcut ways to making gingerbread houses by starting with a cardboard base, which I have also done with the grandkids on occasion, and I have a video on my channel about that. For very young children that I've worked with, we used graham crackers to make small houses. Each child can make their own. I made a foam core house base to make construction a lot easier for the very young children, so they could just put their graham crackers on, they'd start gluing their candies on without having to worry about it caving in. But for children above the age of 6, I let them construct their own house with graham crackers, which meant that if they overload it too quickly before the glue sets or the icing sets, it will cave in. And that's a challenge for them, but it's a good exercise about learning how to do construction. Each child should be challenged at their own level. Now, my theme for this year's Christmas was the Nativity. I had helped make some nativity sets for my church for the annual church Christmas dinner. I made a nativity set as a gift for one of my granddaughters, plus I included the nativity in my Christmas cards. So I felt that I should make a gingerbread nativity scene. I already had the nativity cookie cutters, so my plan was to make a nativity that would fit them. This way, I don't have to hand cut out all of my own characters, which I have done in years past. I wanted to find a shortcut because I felt pressed for time. With pencil and paper, I sat down and I drew out my design on just regular computer paper. The dough may be a little too hard when it's just fresh out of the fridge to work, so I let it sit out at least an hour to make it easier to work with. Sometimes a lot of stuff happens and you take it out, you forget, and you think you're going to get to it in an hour, but things happen. The cookie factory is now open. But then you don't. Well, if you leave it out too long, it might become too sticky. If that happens, that happened to us, just put the dough into the freezer for a few more minutes to let it chill just a little bit more. Not to freeze, but just to chill. If you have to add flour, use a sifter to dust it with a very thin layer of flour. I didn't have to dust mine at all out of the fridge. Set it out for an hour. I was very pleased. I didn't have to use any flour. It didn't stick to the parchment paper, and it didn't stick to my rolling pin. Everything worked great. But I did notice that over the time, because it took me a few hours, it took me about 3 hours to get everything rolled out, cut, baked, and then I did all the cookies. It did take me some time. So that last batch, it did start to get a little bit sticky, and I only dusted lightly the rolling pin. I didn't need very much flour at all. I find that it is easier to roll the dough out onto parchment paper. Try to roll the dough with an even pressure. You don't want any areas, some areas thick, some thin. Try to keep it nice and even. So be conscious of that as you're rolling it. I try to get my husband to roll it out, and he puts so much pressure on it, he's making it really thin on the edges, and it's still pretty thick in the middle. So no. Lighten up where it's thinner already, and then give it a little bit more pressure when it's thick, so you can try to get the whole thing even. The goal is to make the dough about 1/4 inch thin. Roll the dough in different directions. Using parchment paper also makes turning the dough easier. Remember, the dough is going to rise a little bit when it's baking in the oven. I cut out the design, pulling up the negative pieces. I used my stone scraper as my cutter. When you're cutting your pieces, press down. Here, I did not want to waste the large areas of dough in and below the opening of the dough, so I used some cookie cutters there. As I pick up the negative pieces, they go into a pile and they get reworked into another ball of dough to roll out for making either more parts or more cookies. For the smaller areas, I used a butter knife. It didn't have any, teeth on it. You get a much better cut. Don't drag your knife, because that'll just kind of rip it and make tears in your dough. If you try to transfer it by hand, you could stretch it or reshape it. You might make it bigger, or you might make it smaller unknowingly. So that's why it's best to just cut it out on your parchment, pick up your parchment paper, and transfer it to your baking pan. Later, I transferred my design to parchment paper, because you probably noticed that the typing paper was sticking to my dough, and it was kind of pulling up little bits of dough, and I was pressing down the little impressions. This way, I do not warp my pattern when transferring it to a baking sheet. I prefer to use cooking stones for most of my baking. For the roof, I created a tile-like texture by pressing the tip of a teaspoon into the roof pan. I stagger the shingles as you would bricks. The next row is centered between the 2 shingles of the previous row. There are probably tools out there that make a similar pattern, but I'm just working with what I have. I set my timer to 12 minutes. When you press a finger into the dough, I got a cat. They always show up in my videos. See? I have a kitty cat. I can't do a video without a cat showing up. Do not wait for it to start turning brown on the edges. It'll be overcooked, and then your cookies will be hard. At the buzzer, I do a finger test. Just a gentle press. When you press a finger into the dough and it springs back, it's cooked enough. But if the finger impression stays, it needs a little more time. For my oven, 12 minutes worked out perfectly. It may need 15 minutes depending on your oven or your elevation. Shortly after your larger pieces come out of the oven, check the size to your pattern and trim with a knife if necessary. Best to do this before it cools. Allow all the pieces to cool completely before assembly. I use Martha Stewart's Royal Glaze recipe, but I find I always have to adjust it because my chickens lay big eggs. If the icing is too thin, it will run and drip a lot. If it's too thick and pasty, you won't get a smooth finish. It is best to be somewhere in the middle. The icing is the glue that will hold your gingerbread construction together. If necessary, you can also insert toothpicks, use them like nails. If you need extra assistance in construction, you use a needle nose pliers to push them into the dough to help with your joinery when connecting pieces. I did not need that because this design was really quite easy and straightforward. I planned this design to have 4 walls, so I had no issues with anything wanting to cave in on me. Only one thing I decided to modify on my pattern was the width of my roof. It should have a bit of an overhang on at least one side. I did want the front to be flush because I had already planned to attach an angel on the peak. I wanted to make golden windows with a light inside, but it was extremely pressed for time, so no lights, no windows, and no colors. I wanted to do different colors, on the characters, but I know there were no windows in the manger, but I wanted to create a golden glow emanating out of the manger because of the Christ child. So with the limited time I had, I just outlined the design with white glaze, and it was done rather quickly. Maybe next year I will have more time to do a better nativity out of gingerbread. As it was, I got up at 3 a.m. to design, cut, and bake this project. Had I not got up that early, this project would have never got done. I actually edited this video right after Christmas of 2022 to post for the year 2023. As a matter of fact, all my December videos this year are from last year's projects. My plan is to give myself a break for next year so I don't feel so pressed for time, allowing me to focus on the season and enjoy all of it. I hope that you will have fun with your family as you make cherished memories around gingerbread. Some years I get the adults to help me, either in cutting out the gingerbread cookies or in just decorating. Either one is a good time to spend together. Gingerbread cookies don't even need frosting or candies. They can stand on their own. And with as busy and as tired as I was last year, we never did frost them. I let the younger grandchildren cut out and decorate the sugar cookies, and oh my goodness, what a mess they made. Those cookies had so much sugar on them, I opted to just leave the gingerbread cookies as is. The moms helped her roll out and cut the cookies as we spent time together. Have a Merry Christmas as you make memories with your family. Thanks for watching.